Welcome to the Economist in Your Ear podcast. Today, we're looking at something really fascinating coming out of India. It's this paradox. You've got a country with just countless laws, an incredible number of them, but its people often seem to be in a situation where following all the rules is, well, almost impossible. It really makes you ask, how can a legal system end up, maybe without meaning to, encouraging people to break rules instead of follow them?
It's a huge question, isn't it? And it takes us right into the nitty-gritty of everyday life in India. We're not just going to, list off a bunch of regulations. We really want to dig into why there are so many, and maybe more importantly, what that actually means for ordinary people, for the economy. This goes a bit deeper than just saying there's too much red tape. It challenges that whole idea of overregulation itself.
Okay, let's unpack this then. To really get a feel for it, maybe start with an example. Something relatable, but maybe surprising. Like, imagine you're in Mumbai, big city financial hub, right? You've had a long day, maybe traveling, maybe working, and you think, I'll just grab a Kingfisher beer. Seems totally normal, right? A simple beer.
Exactly. But technically speaking, that simple act could land you in trouble. You see, there's this law, the Bombay Prohibition Act from way back in 1949, Section 40. And under that law, you actually need a permit to drink alcohol legally if you don't have one. Well, a first offense could mean a fine of 10,000 rupees. That's, what, about $115? And maybe even up to 6 months in jail.
6 months for having a beer without a permit. Wow, that's quite an introduction to the system. And that 10,000 rupees, it hints at the scale, doesn't it? I read that Viggy, this legal think tank in Delhi, they've counted things up. They say India has something like 7,305 national crimes on the books. Is that right?
That's the figure they published, yes. 7,305. And here's the really striking part. About 3/4 of those crimes, so, the vast majority, carry the possibility of imprisonment. It really makes you stop and think about what constitutes a crime.
It does. How does that compare to other places, say the U.S. or China?
Well, comparisons are always tricky, but just for context, the U.S. had around 5,200 federal crimes listed back in 2019. Still a lot, but fewer than India's national count. And China, which obviously has a very different system and reputation, it has the death penalty for 46 different crimes. India actually has it on the books for 301 offenses. Now, it's very, very rarely applied in India. That's crucial to state. But the number itself tells you something about the legal philosophy. It suggests this tendency towards state control over really vast areas of life, potentially criminalizing things that might seem ordinary elsewhere.
And it's not just the central government, is it? The states have a huge role, too. India's got 28 states, and they handle loads of policy areas, education, local business, you name it. And they seem just as keen on making rules. This is where it gets really personal, almost intrusive, like that example from Uttarakhand.
Ah, yes, the live-in relationship registration. That's a really telling one. So if a couple is living together in Uttarakhand, they're supposed to register their relationship with the local authorities within 30 days and pay a fee.
And if they don't?
A fine, potentially, but also possibly up to 3 months in prison. And get this, if the relationship ends, they have to go through another process, a deregistration, and pay another fee.
Deregistering a breakup, that seems incredibly bureaucratic for something so personal.
It absolutely is. And think about the broader effect. When you have laws reaching into such private areas, it creates this sort of constant low-level hum of anxiety. Following the rules stops being simple common sense and becomes this huge, complicated task. It makes you feel like you could be breaking some rule you don't even know exists.
Okay, so personal life is one thing, but this must spill over into the economy too, right? Especially with taxes. The article mentioned businesses almost cowering.
Yes, the tax system is notoriously complex. Take renting, for example. If you're paying rent above a certain threshold, and it's not a particularly high threshold, you, the renter, are supposed to withhold part of that rent. And then you have to deposit it directly with the government as tax owed by the landlord.
Wait, the renter has to handle the landlord's tax withholding?
In some cases, yes. And often that means you need to get a special tax number, maybe even hire an accountant, just to pay your rent correctly according to the rules.
Yeah.
And on top of that, some people end up paying income tax 4 times a year.
Yeah.
It's a lot to manage.
And the penalties if you mess up, even by accident.
They can be really harsh. The rules were tightened recently, I think in June. We're talking fines up to potentially 200% of the tax due, plus interest, like 24% annually, and even the possibility of prosecution. And the article points out there's often no leeway for honest mistakes.
Wow. So making a genuine error could cost you double the tax plus massive interest.
Potentially, yes. And it raises that question, doesn't it? What kind of message does that send? Instead of encouraging compliance, it almost feels like it's designed to trip people up. It could easily push people towards the informal economy, just to avoid the hassle and risk.
That makes sense. It sounds counterproductive if you want a broad tax base. And what about businesses trying to grow?
That's another major hurdle. There's a goods and services tax, GST. Once a business grows beyond a pretty small size, they have to register for it. Which sounds okay, but the compliance burden that comes with it can actually discourage companies from wanting to grow past that threshold.
So growth itself triggers more complexity.
Exactly. And it gets worse. A business might need to register for GST in every single state it operates in, even if they don't have an office or factory there, just customers. Plus, they often have to pay the taxes that buyers supposedly withheld monthly, regardless of whether the buyer has actually paid them yet.
So the business is paying tax on money they haven't even received.
That can happen, yes. You can see how this really tangles things up.
Yeah.
Big companies, they have teams for this, lawyers, accountants. They can navigate it, mostly. But for small businesses, startups, it's a massive drain on resources and time. It really can stifle innovation and growth rather than helping it.
It sounds less like regulation and more like an obstacle course.
That's a good way to put it, a very complex obstacle course.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The article also talks about rules that just seem, well, baffling, but almost illogical.
Ah, yes, the sort of where did that come from? Rules. There are some great examples. Think about brand new highways, big elevated roads being built, and then the speed limit is set at something like 30 kilometers per hour. That's what, 18 miles per hour?
On a new highway, why even build it then?
Exactly. Or local officials deciding to, say, brick up the entrance to a park or a public walkway for safety reasons, but it just blocks access entirely.
Right, and the airport security example was classic.
Oh, the spices, yes. Your packet of curry powder might get confiscated at security, but a packet of instant noodles, which has a little spice sachet inside it, that's often allowed through.
That makes no sense.
None at all. And that's the point, really. When there's no clear logic, when rules seem completely arbitrary, it just encourages people to ignore them, doesn't it? Because why follow something that feels random or nonsensical?
And it seems sometimes these rules just pop up because an official thinks it's a good idea, not based on, evidence or public need.
That definitely seems to happen. The article mentions a central government minister who decided air conditioners should only be set between 20 and 28 degrees Celsius, called it a first-of-its-kind experiment for energy saving, maybe well-intentioned, but imposed by decree. Or that minister in Kerala wanting to fine people for using their phones while crossing the road.
Right, and the Goa example, too, about the beach shacks.
Ah, the freshly cooked Goan cuisine. That was quite something. The policy said shacks had to offer it. Fair enough, promote local food. But then the tourism minister just announced unilaterally that this meant specifically fish curry and rice, even though the policy didn't say that at all.
So one person's definition becomes the rule.
Effectively, yes. And it highlights this bigger issue. What happens when policy seems driven by personal whim rather than clear laws, consultation, or any real rationale? It just adds to that feeling of arbitrariness and erodes trust in the whole process.
We've covered a lot, the sheer number of laws, the impact on daily life, on business, these baffling rules. Now, the usual explanation you hear for why India has so many laws is the colonial legacy, right? Inheriting that British Raj bureaucracy.
That's often cited, yes. The idea that a complex controlling system was just left behind and built upon. And to be fair, there are efforts now to clean things up. Like in 2023, they decriminalized about 183 provisions in older laws that were basically defunct. And apparently there's more rationalization planned, a deregulation commission for businesses, maybe a new tax bill coming.
So some positive steps.
Definitely welcome moves, yes. But the article argues the root problem goes deeper than just old laws. It points to the underlying attitudes of politicians and bureaucrats. Arghya Sengupta from Vidhi puts it very bluntly. He says, "We think the state must have a say in every aspect of an individual's life, and therefore everything is game for legislation."
So it's a mindset issue, a belief that the state should control everything.
That seems to be the argument. A kind of deep-seated paternalism, maybe? A lack of trust in citizens, perhaps? This idea that more rules automatically mean better governance, even if the rules are impossible to follow. It's less about legacy and more about current philosophy.
Okay, so if that's the mindset, what's the end result? We started by saying it seems to make people less law-abiding, not more.
Exactly. That's the core paradox. If, as the article suggests, everything is verboten, if everyday activities are potentially illegal, why would you even try to follow all the rules? It becomes impossible. And for businesses, why take the risk of growing if it just means more rules, more inspections, more potential fines. It discourages formal participation.
It creates a system that people naturally try to work around rather than work within.
Precisely. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. There's that quote from the high-ranking official, complaining that the state sets these impossibly high standards, then turns around and says, Indians are lawless. But his point was cutting. You have made it impossible for them to follow the law.
You've made it impossible. That really sums it up, doesn't it? The system itself creates the conditions for noncompliance.
It seems that way. Skirting the rules becomes almost a rational response, a way to cope rather than an act of defiance.
What a fascinating and frankly quite concerning picture of how things can work or maybe not work. It really challenges that simple idea that more laws automatically equal more order. Here, it seems to do the opposite.
It really does. And maybe for you listening, it's worth thinking about that dynamic. How does a culture where everything is regulated, often arbitrarily, affect the trust between people and the government? What does that do to a society's energy, its willingness to innovate, its sense of individual freedom? There are real costs, often hidden, when the system itself makes being lawful so incredibly difficult.
A really powerful point to reflect on, how the very design of the rules can shape behavior in unexpected and maybe unintended ways. Something to consider perhaps not just in India, but anywhere we see complex regulations. Thanks for this discussion.